There are times when whiskey isn't just whiskey, it's a first impression. Maybe you're meeting the in-laws, maybe it's the office party, or maybe you're trying to convince your boss you've got refined taste.
Today we're providing 20 whiskeys that are guaranteed to impress anyone with a refined palate for whiskey. Whether you're sitting across from your father-in-law, your boss, or that one coworker who won't shut up about their bourbon collection. And if you want to look like you know whiskey, check out the Barrel Hunters merch store. We have shirts for every occasion, every season, and it's the best way to support our channel, so we can keep bringing content like this to you.
Check the link in the description below, including a 10% off code on your first purchase. We really appreciate your support.
We also want to thank you guys because we finally hit 10,000 subscribers. We truly appreciate all your support. And since starting our channel, our goal has always been to create a community of whiskey lovers without the pretentiousness. We're one step closer and we couldn't do it without you. So keep those likes and comments coming.
To mark this very special occasion, we'll be hosting a live stream on Wednesday, January 14th. More details to follow, but come hang out with us, bring a drink, and ask us anything. Can't wait to see you there. Now, it's time to impress.
You don't need a $500 bottle to look like you know whiskey. I'd argue that many whiskey aficionados would much rather go after a uniquely obscure bottle over overhyped pours any day of the week.
So what we did today is put together 10 categories that cover everything, from a $30 overachiever that punches way above its weight to bottles that'll make your in-laws think you inherited a trust fund.
Once we're done here, you'll get the girl, the promotion, and you'll be invited to every single holiday party and corporate event.
Category number 1 is the $30 overachiever. Eddie, my pick for this one is gonna be Early Times Bottled in Bond.
Good choice.
Thank you. This is a name that's been around forever, but still flies way under the radar. It's 100 proof, properly bonded, and made by Brown-Forman, the same folks behind Old Forester and Woodford Reserve. What that means is you're getting legitimate heritage and craftsmanship for what most people spend on a pizza. It's got that caramel and oak backbone you'd expect from a classic Kentucky bourbon, but it's balanced. Not harsh, not sweet, just solid whiskey that drinks like something twice the price. If you want to impress your in-laws without looking like you tried too hard, this is the play. It's a quiet confidence pour, the kind of bottle that says, yeah, I know whiskey, I just don't need to flex about it.
For me, it's Wild Turkey 101. Many bourbon fans consider Wild Turkey 101 to be the best bang for your buck on the market today. For $20, you get big vanilla and toffee notes, a little spice on the back end, and a legacy that spans generations, from Jimmy Russell, the longest tenured master distiller in the world, and his son Eddie. Whether neat, on the rocks, or in cocktails, it always delivers. If you're invited to a dinner party and don't want to spend a ton of money on whiskey, bring this economical bottle of goodness. I promise you that even your father-in-law, who only drinks the good stuff, will pour a second glass. Wild Turkey 101 is an affordable bottle that is bold, classic, and instantly recognizable.
All right, we got 2 bottles under 30 bucks, and both make you look like you know exactly what you're doing. Now let's move from the smart spending to the safe bets. Bottles everybody at the table can enjoy without a disclaimer. These are the safe crowd pleasers.
Taste is subjective, but when you don't know what someone wants, a safe route is definitely Eagle Rare 10. It's rich without being heavy, smooth without being flat, and that balance of caramel, vanilla, and oak just works for every kind of bourbon drinker. But because Eagle Rare is significantly hard to find, at least right now, I'd also recommend its more affordable and accessible sibling, Buffalo Trace, because there is no safer way to win people over than with the bottle that everyone recognizes and respects. Buffalo Trace and Eagle Rare are made by the same distillery and use the same mash bill. That said, they're not the same. Eagle Rare is aged for more time, which means you're getting richer, more complex flavors compared to Buffalo Trace. But for the price, availability, and taste, you cannot beat Buffalo Trace. Even if your in-laws know nothing about whiskey, they've heard of Buffalo Trace. It's basically whiskey's version of comfort food. You can pour it for your boss, your mom, or your cousin who usually orders vodka cranberries, and everyone is happy. Bottom line, Eagle Rare 10 and Buffalo Trace are your social insurance policies. Order either one, and you're suddenly the guy who knows some about whiskey.
All right, man, great choices. But for me, it's gonna be Redbreast 12, because sometimes crowd pleaser doesn't mean boring. This one's got plenty of character. It's Irish whiskey with a century of craftsmanship behind it, and I've never met anyone that didn't like it. The flavors are warm. Think honey, toasted nuts, a touch of baking spice, and that makes it the perfect bridge between whiskey veterans and newcomers. Plus, the story sells itself. An age statement, old world roots, and a brand that's been quietly outclassing half the bourbon shelf for decades. If you show up with Redbreast 12, you're signaling taste, patience, and a little outside the box thinking at dinner. It's the kind of bottle that impresses without trying, and that's exactly what this category is about.
So all we're trying to say is that you've got options. Try to play it safe without playing it dull. Next up, we're bringing out the bottles with stories worth telling. These are the bottles with a story.
For my story, I'm gonna pick Old Forester 1910.
That's a great choice.
Thank you.
Excellent.
And I'll tell you why. Because few bottles connect history and flavor this well. The story goes back to a fire at the Old Forester Distillery in, you guessed it, 1910. A batch of mature whiskey was waiting to be bottled when the fire broke out. So they had to store it in new charred oak barrels until the bottling line was rebuilt. What came out months later had this incredible double barrel depth, sweet, toasty, and layered. Today's version recreates that happy accident, and the result is this dessert-like richness with dark chocolate, brown sugar, and roasted oak. It's bold but polished, like you actually know what secondary maturation means. When you pull this out at dinner, you're not just pouring bourbon. You're telling a story about turning disaster into something delicious. And that's the kind of story people remember long after the glass is empty.
My choice is Uncle Nearest 1856. And if you don't know the story behind this one, it's worth learning because it's one of the most important in American whiskey. Nathan Nearest Green was a formerly enslaved man who taught Jack Daniel how to distill and went on to help young Jack start his own distillery where he became the first black master distiller in the United States. He created the sugar maple charcoal filtering process that is synonymous with not just Jack Daniel's products, but Tennessee whiskey as a whole. The Uncle Nearest brand was created to make sure that his name finally got the recognition that it deserved. And the whiskey itself lives up to that history. It's rich, balanced, and smooth, with caramel and baking spice that makes it as inviting as its backstory. But the impact goes deeper. It represents respect, acknowledgement, and craftsmanship. You pour this for someone and it immediately starts a conversation that's bigger than the bottle. If you want to look like someone who values substance and story along with taste, Uncle Nearest 1856 is your move.
The point here is whether you're pouring a whiskey born from a distillery fire or one born from forgotten history, both of these bottles make a statement. Not everyone at the table wants something big or bold. Some of them just want something soft, smooth, and maybe a little wine adjacent, which is perfect because next up is the wine drinker friendly whiskey.
My pick is Starward Twofold, an Australian whiskey that's basically a gateway pour for anyone who thinks whiskey is too strong. It's a blend of malt and wheat whiskeys aged entirely in Australian red wine barrels, so it carries the soft, fruit-forward profile. You get a boatload of berries, vanilla, and just a little bit of oak. It's like a cherry pie in a glass. It's got enough complexity for whiskey drinkers, but enough softness for people who love themselves some nightly grown-up grape juice. And when you drop the aged in Shiraz and Cabernet barrels line, you instantly sound like you've got global whiskey knowledge. If you're trying to impress a 1-2 combination of a whiskey drinker and a wine sipper, Starward Twofold is your jam. It's friendly, elegant, affordable, and surprisingly different. The perfect conversation starter for people who never thought they'd like whiskey in the first place.
That's honestly a great choice and one that I was considering picking too, but since you went with it, I'm going with something different. So my pick for this one is gonna be Basil Hayden Red Wine Cask Finish. And I know some whiskey purists might scoff at wine finished bourbon, but that's exactly why this bottle works.
I don't understand the hate, Ryan. I think it's a good bottle.
It is.
It is.
It is. You know, they do some good cask finish stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's not the strongest. It doesn't have a ton of oak flavor, but it works for people who like sweeter whiskeys.
I'm glad you said that because it's the perfect bridge between those two worlds. You get the lighter proof, like you mentioned, which makes it approachable, while the red wine cask finish adds this subtle layer of dried fruit and sweetness that softens everything out. It's the kind of pour that feels familiar to your wine drinking aunt. A little fruit, a little spice, and a smooth finish that doesn't fight back. And let's be honest, showing up with a bottle that says red wine cask finish right on the label immediately tells people you're thoughtful about what you bring. If your goal is to impress without intimidating, Basil Hayden Red Wine Cask Finish is the move. It's refined, it's accessible, and it makes you look like someone who actually thought about who's sitting around the table, not just what's sitting on it.
That sounds a little...
That sounds dirty. I immediately regret saying that.
All right, we covered the wine crowd. Now let's talk about someone who's a little tougher to win over. The guy who still thinks that Crown Royal is the best whiskey ever made. This next one's for him. This is the Smooth Dad Whiskey.
I had to include this one somewhere on the list, and my pick for this one is gonna be Sagamore Spirit Double Oak Rye. Because if you're trying to convert a die-hard Crown Royal drinker, this is the way to do it. One of my favorite bottles of all time because it's rich, it's rounded, and sweet, but it still has that rye backbone that gives it some edge. Double oaked just means it spends time in 2 barrels. The second one is freshly toasted and charred, so it enhances all those dessert-like notes. Caramel, vanilla, and a little bit of spice. It's the kind of whiskey that sneaks up on people who think they don't like rye. You pour them a glass of this, they swirl it, they'll take a sip and go, oh, okay, that's actually pretty good. It's smooth enough for the casual drinker, but layered enough to earn respect from anyone at the table. If your father-in-law likes Crown or Canadian blends, this is your upgrade move. It's got that same easy drinking charm, but it tastes more mature. Like you just leveled up from beer league softball to a private golf club membership.
For me, it's Woodford Reserve Double Oak, because no matter who's drinking it, everyone seems to enjoy it. This bourbon is heavy on the chocolate, toasted oak, and brown sugar with just a touch of that signature Woodford spice. It's indulgent, approachable, unique, and looks great sitting on the table. It also hits that sweet spot where beginners and enthusiasts overlap. The flavor is rich enough to feel special, but never overwhelming. You could serve this to your dad, your boss, or your friend who normally spikes their Coke with whiskey, and they'd all be happy. So if you're trying to order something different for someone who is stuck in their ways, Woodford Double Oaked is the way to go. It's dependable and smooth, while the heavy oak notes provide something memorable.
So whether you decide to go double oak bourbon or double oak rye, the message is the same. You've got taste and you know how to read the room. Now that we've covered the smooth talkers, let's move into something a little more indulgent. Whiskey that's basically dessert with a cork in it. This is the fancy finish.
A finished whiskey is defined as a whiskey that has undergone a secondary maturation process in a cask that previously held another wine or spirit. And some of these are creative whiskeys that are tasty as hell. In this category, my heart will always be reserved for Penelope Rio, which might be one of the most fun and unique bottles that I have ever had. It's finished in honey and amberana casks. And amberana is this Brazilian wood that adds wild baking spice notes like cinnamon, nutmeg, gingerbread, and a little sweet heat. It's not your typical bourbon profile, but that's exactly why it stands out. You add in that honey barrel sweetness and you have a dessert in a glass that still tastes like a proper whiskey. But the issue with Penelope Rio is that as of this video's release, it's very limited and has only been made in small batches during the early parts of the last couple of years. So assuming that you can't find it to impress a boss or in-law, I recommend a little known distillery in Washington State called Doc Swinson. Doc Swinson has a line full of finished whiskeys called the Exploratory Cask Series, one of which also uses the aforementioned amberana cask finish called Bossa Nova. They also have whiskeys that are tawny port finished, rum finished, expeated Scotch finished, and so much more. I personally love and recommend Doc Swinson's Bossa Nova, but honestly, you cannot go wrong with any of their experimental cask bottles if you're looking for something interesting that will make you stand out against the more conventional whiskey lovers. You'll be guaranteed to impress your boss or father-in-law with something that is unique, delicious, and makes you look like you actually know what all the finished whiskey craze is all about.
My pick for this one is gonna be Old Elk Cognac Cask Finish. And this one just oozes luxury, but in that effortless, I do this all the time kind of way. Old Elk already makes beautifully balanced bourbon, and finishing it in cognac barrels takes it to another level. You're gonna get those deep fruit notes. Think plum, figs, raisins, layered over this rich vanilla and oak core. I mean, honestly, it's completely decadent, but it's backed up by some proof too. You pour this after dinner, people lean in. It's the bottle that makes people go quiet for a second because it smells that good. Old Elk Cognac Finish is a statement whiskey. It's undeniably impressive, straight up class in a bottle.
Whether it's amberana or cognac, both of these bottles highlight how exceptional cask finishing can be. And it's also the point where people stop asking what you brought and start asking where they can buy it. All right, we flexed our muscles when it came to finishing barrels, and now it's time to leave the country. The next one up is the International Flex.
Eddie, my pick here is gonna be Nika from the Barrel. And if you're looking to show off a little worldliness without turning it into a lecture, this is your bottle. It is Japanese whiskey that perfectly blends elegance and intensity. Bottled at just over 100 proof, so it has power, but it delivers it with grace. You get layers of spice, dried fruit, and just a little bit of smoke, along with a mix of malt and grain whiskeys inside. Everything about this bottle feels intentional. From the flavor to that squared off bottle that looks like it belongs in a high-end Tokyo bar. It's the kind of whiskey that says, yep, I appreciate bourbon, but I've also been around. When you pour Nika from a barrel, people take notice. It's sophisticated, it's balanced, and it's one of the easiest ways to prove your whiskey knowledge isn't stuck in Kentucky.
I went with Lafroy 10 because sometimes the best way to stand out is to show you're not afraid of a little peat. Now this one's not for everyone, but that's exactly what makes it impressive. You open that bottle and the room immediately knows that you mean business. It's smoky, coastal, medicinal, all the bold characters that Scotch fans love and casual drinkers never forget. And best of all, it pairs incredibly well with smoked salmon and sushi. Lafroy 10 is unapologetically itself, and it doesn't care if it's not quote unquote smooth. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be memorable. Lafroy is the whiskey version of a hot chili eating contest. So if you're trying to impress someone by how rugged your palate is for whiskey, this is it.
Well, we clearly had two whiskeys from completely different worlds. One is more refined, one is more rebellious, but both instantly tell people you know your whiskey geography. So if your in-laws think whiskey stops at bourbon, this category is how you prove them wrong. Politely, of course. And speaking of bold moves, sometimes the best way to impress is with proof. The next one's for the serious drinkers. This is the serious whiskey guy.
This is for the people who love themselves some strong whiskey and they know their stuff. So for them, my pick is Larceny Barrel Proof, because nothing says I know what I'm doing like pulling a wheated bourbon that clocks in at over 120 proof and still drinks beautifully.
Oh, great choice.
Right?
Great choice.
This isn't a bottle you pour for everyone. This is the one that you break out when you want to earn a little respect from the whiskey crowd. What makes Larceny Barrel Proof special is how it keeps that signature softness from the wheat, but also this huge depth of flavor from the proof. You get brown sugar, baking spice, a little toffee, and a finish that lingers without burning you alive. It's rich, powerful, and unfiltered, but it's also balanced. This is that sweet spot that separates the pros from the beginners. If you're trying to impress your boss or your whiskey snob uncle, this is your bottle. It shows you like your bourbon bold, but you still appreciate craftsmanship. It's strength and structure, and that combination will earn you street cred in the whiskey world.
For me, I'm gonna pick Blue Spot, and this is where Irish whiskey flexes its muscle. It's the cash strength sibling in the Spot lineup, bottled at around 117 proof, and it somehow manages to be both intense and refined at the same time. You get tropical fruit, vanilla spice, and this deep oak richness that builds with every sip, all without losing that signature Irish smoothness. What I love about Blue Spot is that it challenges expectations. Most people think Irish whiskey is all light and easy. This one walks in wearing a tailored suit and carrying a sledgehammer. This one is proof that power and polish can coexist, and it earns you instant respect from anyone who's ever doubted Irish whiskey's range. If you want to impress whiskey veterans and surprise the casual drinkers, this is your ace in the hole. It's classy, complex, and unapologetically strong. Exactly what this category is all about.
All right, we shown off some muscle. Now it's time for pure prestige. This next category is all about the bottles that turn heads the moment they hit the table. This is all about having a measuring contest regardless of the cost. This is the guaranteed respect getter.
My pick here is gonna be William LaRue Weller. And this is one of those bottles that instantly changes the energy in the entire room. You pull this baby out and suddenly your boss is standing a little straighter, your in-laws stop talking, everyone knows they're in the presence of royalty. This one is wheated bourbon at its absolute peak. Full-bodied, complex, and high proof. You get caramel, oak, vanilla, and that deep, chewy texture that only comes from elite level aging and blending. It's warm, rich, and powerful, but it never feels like it's trying to impress you. It just does. When you show up with William LaRue Weller, you're not flexing, you're making a statement. It's like showing up to a dinner party in a tuxedo you didn't have to rent. It tells everyone you know whiskey on a first name basis.
My pick is one of the most legendary names in bourbon, George T. Stagg. This sexy stallion is high proof, dark, and loaded with character. Every sip feels like an event. Waves of dark chocolate, burnt sugar, leather, and that spice that just keeps unfolding. This thing is one of the tastiest bottles I've ever had in my life. With Stagg, you get pure intensity, but with balance and elegance. It's the whiskey equivalent of a classic sports car, loud, beautiful, but timeless. That's what this is.
Well said.
You order George T. Stagg for your boss or bring it to a family gathering or company dinner, and you don't have to say a word. The bottle does all the talking. It says you've arrived, it barely fits in your pants, and you brought something worth celebrating.
All right, those are two heavy hitters, both from Buffalo Trace, both guaranteed to get respect from anyone who's ever taken whiskey seriously. Well, we've gone from accessible to elite, but sometimes the most impressive move isn't showing off something rare, it's pulling out something most people have never even heard of, but absolutely should. These are the deep cuts.
My pick is a bottle that you may not have heard of, and that is Old Man Winter Bourbon from Preservation Distillery. And this is one of those bottles that quietly tells you that it's special the second you see it. It has this white wax seal, the old school label, and the small batch charm. Inside, it's all about craftsmanship. Rich caramel, toasted oak, and brown sugar lead the way, with a hint of winter spice that makes it feel like it was built for nights by the fire. I tried this baby several months ago, and it stuck with me as one of the best bottles that I've tried this year. It's warm, layered, and incredibly complex. It's the kind of bourbon that most whiskey fans haven't heard of, but once they try it, it feels like a reward for exploring beyond the big names. Old Man Winter is a conversation starter. I guarantee that the biggest whiskey snob in the room will try it and immediately fall in love with you for introducing them to a real small batch Kentucky bourbon.
My pick here is gonna be Middle West Dark Pumpernickel Rye. And this one's also a conversation starter from the first pour. Most rye whiskeys are made with standard rye grain, but Middle West uses dark pumpernickel, which gives it this deep, bready richness you don't find anywhere else. It's bold, spicy, and just a little savory, the kind of whiskey that makes people stop and ask, wait, what is that? What I love about it is that it's complex. It's got pepper, notes of cocoa, and this roasted grain depth that feels completely unique. And because Middle West is based out of Columbus, Ohio, it's one of those distilleries that's building a serious reputation among whiskey insiders while still flying under the radar for most casual drinkers. If you bring Middle West Dark Pumpernickel Rye to a tasting or a dinner, it tells people you've done your homework. You're not chasing hype, you're finding quality before everyone else catches on. It's confident, original, and honestly, one of the most rewarding bottles you can introduce people to.
Whether it's small batch bourbon sealed in white wax or a pumpernickel rye from the Midwest, these bottles prove that great whiskeys don't need a big name, just big flavor. Let us know in the comments which one of these bottles would win over your crowd. Or if you've got a go-to impress the in-laws pour that we missed, drop it down below.
In the meantime, check out some of our other videos on your screen right now. We'll see you over there, and a huge thank you. Till next time,
Cheers.